There's always a handful of families that you never forget. One of those families that I worked with had adopted 2 boys from foster care, and they were just a really well-prepared, trying to do all the right things kind of family. I mean, they had read the books, they had gone to the classes, they had prayed about it, and they really loved these boys, and they were not questioning whether they should have adopted or not. This was how they planned to have their family. But a few years later, they did ask themselves, and it probably wasn't even a few years. I mean, they were hitting struggles right off of the bat. And I remember her telling me, even when the one kid was just 2 years old, that they were like, what is going on? Like, what are we missing? This cannot be just how it is, right? And it's not because they didn't love the boys or they weren't committed, but they did not know how to help them. And they were trying all the things. So I'm going to tell you about their story today because I think that it might help you. It may sound like a family you know. It may sound like a family in your family, like maybe you have a brother or sister or aunt, uncle, somebody that's adopted, or maybe it's your family. So this family, they lived out in the country. They were very hardworking parents. They had stable jobs. They had a strong marriage, and they had dreamed for years about becoming parents and growing their family through adoption. And then they adopted these 2 little boys, and they knew there were going to be challenges. I mean, you take the classes, they tell you, if there's been trauma, this is what's going to happen. And they knew that there had been trauma, and they expected some big emotions. But I think that what really threw them off was just the intensity of everything that they were going through. I mean, one little boy's emotions were impossible to miss because he screamed, he kicked, he yelled, he had explosive tantrums that could last for hours. I mean, I am not kidding, could last for hours. And his anger filled the whole house. The other brother was completely different. He was quieter. Sometimes he would smile right at you while he was quietly destroying something behind your back. His anger showed up in more hidden ways. He was very charming in some ways. But then his family would find holes in the couch, something broken in his room or in the garage, hidden, a treasured belonging destroyed days after it happened. They would find it. There was just more of this like quiet rage that in many ways was even harder because they never knew quite what they were going to discover next. And the feeling of like distrust was really, really strong. But on the surface, when you would see this kid, you were like, why are you having such a problem with this kid, right? The other thing that they discovered was, it felt like the boys would just go to anybody, right? Any stranger, but one in particular, like he would literally, the mom said he would trade me in a heartbeat, right? But to her face, like he was, would write her notes, I love you, mommy, things like this. So it was just really hard because there was like an unease and you can't quite put your finger on it. And that's how attachment disorder is. It's like you can't quite like explain it or, unless other people. And there was just this fear, I think, too, because you're not just managing behavior. You're wondering if your child understands anything that you're trying to teach them. And I think that their home felt like they were just waiting for the next crisis, and the next crisis was always happening. It seemed like it wasn't like there was a break. It was like if one thing wasn't happening, another thing was happening. And so everyone was on edge, even the kids. And what really broke my heart was that the parents weren't ignoring the problems. They found excellent therapists. They did play therapy. They did evaluations. They really wanted to understand what was going on. And to a certain degree, they did understand. They were like, okay, we get it, that this is because of the neglect or the abuse or, all of these things. But what do we do about it, right? They had all the diagnosis and they did what people told them to do, but they didn't have the actual help to make it happen. And still, every morning they were waking up wondering, what kind of day is this going to be? And I just, it just felt like, even though the household did not feel chaotic, it felt like nobody could really relax. They certainly weren't relaxed. And to, to be fair, they probably weren't really relaxing kind of people. Like they were hardworking, they had property, they were always doing something, right? But they were even avoiding like traveling because every outing felt unpredictable. There was family members that they hadn't gone to visit, but it would sort of work if the family came to see them. They didn't do a lot of family activities because it was exhausting. And I don't think that they were really even enjoying being together, because even being together, there's something happening. And we were watching a movie, having popcorn, and one kid is destroying the couch, while everyone else is kind of watching, or another kid is having a meltdown because he doesn't like this part of the movie. It just was constantly something. And if you've ever felt that way, I want you to know, like, you are not alone. This is very typical. So by the time I met this family, the boys were around 10 and 11 years old. And one thing I noticed almost immediately surprised them is they knew how to stop the behavior, and they knew how to create physical safety when the kids were younger. I mean, they were getting bigger and they were concerned about, like, we can't keep doing this. Like, what do we do, right? Because with little kids, there is this sense of like, you can get a hold of them and you can, kind of make them do things. But when you have kids that, even when they're very young, don't let anybody fool you by saying, like, what could they possibly do? They're only 7 years old. Like, no, like, find somebody like me that understands, like, they can do a lot, even when they're 4, 5, 7, whatever. But again, these were wonderful parents, and they knew how to be strict, right? Like, they knew they had to be strict and have order, but they didn't really know how to create kind of that emotional safety and to help the kids feel the safety piece of it. They knew, like, it was just a different feeling in it. And they weren't necessarily harsh. I think that's something that we mistake sometimes, the boundaries and the sense of control, that they were just harsh, but they weren't. And they weren't frightening. The kids were not frightened of them, but their own nervous systems had learned to stay on this high alert because they never knew when the next explosion was going to happen. And the children, I think they felt it. I could certainly feel it in the home. And even sometimes when we don't say anything, our nervous system can communicate before our mouths ever do. And there's things that were going on that weren't said or weren't, like, necessarily addressed, that were just causing a lot of unneeded unrest and unneeded dysregulation. And it makes sense, because when our bodies are prepared for battle, everyone's going to feel it. And I think everybody was just like, in a way, they were kind of like a militant family, in the way they were trying to deal with things, but also like, just like they felt like they were in a war, I think, and it's not because the parents were a problem. Again, like, they weren't doing anything necessarily wrong. They just didn't know how to be regulated themselves and to create a safe place for a dysregulated child in that sense. So one of the things that I teach is called the Calm Plus 5, and it's in my book, and it's in the workbooks, and it's challenging, really, for the parents. It's challenging for the kids, but not once the parents learn how to do it. It's like it's an amazing tool. So a lot of parents try to stay calm even when their kids are, like, freaking out. They're like, well, I stayed really calm and I didn't yell and I didn't lose my cool, right? But kids with trauma, anxiety, ADHD, emotional dysregulation, they need more than just you trying to be calm. It's like your nervous system is holding back all the things that you want to say. And believe me, I was there as a parent at times too. I would, like, have to remind myself sometimes, like, well, you didn't say all those things. You just, they were there. But when I learned how to calm my own self down and be able to really actually be calm with my kids, it was so different than trying to be calm. So I had to teach these parents how to get calm, and how to wait for their child to get calm, not just creating safety in the moment, like stopping a behavior, but stopping the child long enough, having them get calm, get their whole body calm, and then we hold that calm for 5 minutes. And that's the part that a lot of kids that have ADHD, they're like, well, I can't be calm for 5 minutes. It's like when they learn they can, it's so empowering. And so we create like this calmness. I had a family one time that they didn't do like the calm +5 after a while, but they would just have times where it's like, we're just gonna all be quiet for like 30 minutes. And they could do it because they had learned how to just calm down and to just sit and be. And you may think, oh no, you don't know my kids, but this family that I just said that did that, they had 4 boys and they did that. So it's being calm long enough for your nervous system to kind of begin to calm down so that their brain can copy your brain. And that's what co-regulation is. So when you're trying to be calm and trying to address stuff in a calm way, it's not quite the same as you actually getting calm and allowing your child to copy that calm. And you need some help to be able to do that. I'm coaching you as you do it, and you're helping your child to do it. And it doesn't mean that you're permissive. It doesn't mean that we're ignoring unsafe behavior. I mean, far from it. Like a lot of parents are like, oh, you don't believe in consequences. And it's like, oh no, this is the best thing that we can do if we want to teach anything. So we become the solid object in the room. And when everything around us is chaotic, they know where to find that stability. And it changes everything. It really, really does. And there was another piece that we had to work on. So they were incredibly disciplined people, and they had been raised differently than these boys needed to be parented. And I'm sure that you can relate. Many of you can relate to this. And sometimes without realizing it, we hear our own childhood in the back of our minds. Well, we say things like, well, when I was a kid, or my parents would have never, or I would have never, or I would have gotten in so much trouble. And these thoughts really sneak in. And the challenge isn't to let go of the structure or even the ideal of what you want to happen here. But because these boys really needed the structure. But we have to really work with the thought process of like what we're doing in creating the structure and why and how we're helping their brains, rather than, just working from this expectation where we're kind of in the gap of like, we expect kids to act this way and we have kids that are not there. So we have to really work in the gain of where we're going and how we're moving forward. So these boys really needed structure, and not just like strictness, but actual structure. So the challenge was learning how to hold that structure with connection instead of the kind of impatience and annoyance that they weren't like self-motivated or disciplined in themselves, right? Like we're not kids that the parents could give a list and say, okay, go do this today, right? Like the parents would say like, can't they see that we're all working on this, that we're all out like raking leaves or whatever? And it's like, no, like they need to play, and they need to also be part of this as part of their play. So we set up structure that helped them to build that in a different way. And sometimes it meant that we had to wait longer than felt comfortable. And we had to kind of slow down and just wait. So, 5 minutes of waiting for a child without trying to prompt them or talk them into it or threaten or bribe can feel like forever. It actually feels like more time than when you just spend an hour trying to convince them. So sometimes it meant sitting quietly by a child instead of trying to fix the moment. Sometimes it meant remembering that healing doesn't happen on our timetable. And sometimes it meant like, we need to be really clear. We're going to do these 3 things, and then we're going to do this, and not adding more and more and more, because that would happen a lot. Like we would be outside working on something, and because it's going well, sometimes as parents, we add more to it. But when you have structure that is like, this is what we're going to do, this is our expectation, then you're not changing it all the time, and that helps a lot too. One of the saddest things was that I noticed that this family had stopped having fun. every day had kind of become about managing the behavior. And there was a lot of eye rolling, I think, kind of from the parents. Whether the kids saw it or not, it was just like, oh gosh, like, here we go again, or you always do this, kind of, even though if they weren't saying it, just that feeling. And so it's not helpful in moving forward, because it keeps everybody stuck. So even when we're going to have a good moment, we kind of ruin it by thinking that it might turn bad. And they were always trying to prevent the next crisis, or just getting through. Like, we're just trying to get through the day, or get through the evening, or get through bath time, or whatever it was. And they had forgotten about just simply enjoying each other. And yet this was the family that they wanted. And I can't fault them for that, because there are, of course, times in all of our lives when we're not having fun, and it's not happy, and it's hard, right? We all go through hard seasons. But when your family becomes, instead of going through the hard seasons together, but it becomes like it's because of this family, because of these people, that every single minute is hard, then we kind of lose something in the joy. And when you start feeling like you can't go on vacations, you can't go see people, nobody wants to see you, nobody wants to be around you or your kids, that's really hard. So one of the things that we worked on was bringing joy back into their family. We actually had to make them play together. And they were good at, she had tons of games and things, but everything would get turned into kind of a teaching moment. And we had to help them to learn that you could do these things and it still was teaching, even if you weren't verbally teaching. Like, here's what you're learning right now. Instead, allow their body to learn it and feel it. And in doing that, it took some of the pressure off, and they just have fun. We're going to play this game, have fun. Even if somebody has a bad attitude, we can still have fun. And making memories, reminding them, like, your kids are going to look back and they're going to, what are they going to remember about their childhood? What are they going to remember about what it was like growing up in your house? And what kind of things do you want them to remember that you did? And if they can't remember, what kind of things are you going to remind them? Because I found with some of my adult kids, I have to remind them, like, hey, remember when we did this, and remember when we did that? Because it is easy for all of us to get into a mindset of, like, no, it was all terrible, right? It was all hard. And to experience success together. Like, hey, we did this. I mean, they themselves had done so many things on their property, and the boys were a part of that. Even if it was a smaller part than what they expected them to do, they could celebrate that as a family. And they were meant to live together and to enjoy each other. I wish I could tell you that every single behavior disappeared. It didn't. Healing is not that simple, but everything did change. Their confidence grew, the parents knew what to do, and they still had some years left. And I actually just caught up with them recently, and they said, oh, there's been these different challenges, and we found this support and this help, but nobody was getting hurt, and nobody was saying they didn't know what to do, and nobody was just dreading it. In fact, one thing I really appreciated about this family is they really played for the long game. This family began taking trips together again, and they would have problems sometimes on the trips, hard moments, but they knew what to do. They handled it and they moved on, and they were like, wow, that only took 15 minutes. Story, because a lot of times parents feel like they're failing. And they think that if they loved harder, if they find the right medication, if they just find one more therapist, that everything's going to finally change. Doesn't need one more strategy. Sometimes your family just needs a different roadmap. So if your home feels like you're just surviving instead of living, I want you to know that there's hope. And I've watched families go from walking on eggshells every single day to laughing together again. And it's not because anybody became perfect. Their child did not become perfect. They didn't become the perfect parents. None of us are, right? We're all having our first time doing this as humans. But what I want to tell you is that you don't have to figure this out alone. For years, these parents thought they just needed, one more evaluation, one more therapist, one more strategy. But what they really needed was someone to help them understand what their boys' brains were asking for and how to respond in ways that would actually that actually worked. And this is why I have my parent coaching groups. They are 6 weeks long. You're surrounded by other parents who truly get it. They're not parents judging you or telling you what you think they think you should do, or telling you that you're terrible because you had this thought of like, I can't do this anymore. They're raising kids with big behaviors and big emotions too. And every week I give you tools that you can work on, and then there's coaching that happens. So you bring your current stuff that's going on. This is the problem we're having right now, no matter how small or how big, and you leave with a plan, and you gain more confidence. And I have parents that have been in my parenting groups for years, and it's totally changed their family. And so I'm going to put the link in the description, but you can also go to the website on the Work With Me page and join one of the parent groups, and we'll see you there.